Heath Ledger, yes, the famous Joker from the movie The Dark Knight, had a famous line. He said, "Do you know why I use a knife? Guns are too quick. You can't savor all the little emotions. In their last moments, people show you who they really are. It's one thing to kill, but to get pleasure out of killing is quite another." And so, once upon a time, the case had taken years out of his life, though it had been only 2 months since the first killing. A young professional, beautiful, blonde. She was getting home late from work. There were no eyewitnesses. But they had found her phone on Auburn Road under the overpass. 4 days later, they found her body, and what was done to her was plain unspeakable, the product of a deranged mind. Paul Torino was an expert at these kind of cases. But even with all his talent and experience, he was at his wits' end. After 2 months and 3 more blonde girls dead, and the bodies found in depraved conditions, there were no leads, no fingerprints, and no witnesses. It was like the killer came from nowhere and went into nowhere. Paul sat alone at his desk, poring over tons of files when the storm outside grew indignant and blew the power grid, swallowing an entire part of the city into the mouth of its darkness. Paul let his hands find his cell phone and turned on the torch. There wasn't really any point working in the dark. Perhaps the warning would bring with it some light on the case. It was time to call it a night. Paul drove through the empty streets. The sheets of rain that fell were enough to discourage any odd jaywalker. It was a block past the Auburn Road intersection when Paul felt a loud thud. He had little choice but to step out in the downpour and see what had happened. The front right wheel had sunk into an open manhole. The damn thing was big enough to swallow the tire of a monster truck. This was bad news. He looked around for anyone who could help him. There was no one. Not that he could really see far in that downpour. He would have to call the towing company to pull the car out and probably take a cab home. "Why don't you put the car into reverse while I lift the car out of the hole?" Paul was startled by the voice. He turned around to find an old man in a long trench coat and a strange hat, smiling at him through some broken front teeth. "You mean you could be at the wheel while I tried to pull it out?" Paul clarified. "No, I meant what I said." The smile remained constant, like it was plastered on the stranger's face. Paul shrugged. He didn't have anything to lose. He sat behind the wheel, threw the stick shift into reverse, stepped on the pedal, and watched to his shock the stranger pull the car out of the manhole with remarkable ease. He must be hell of a strong man. Even before he could get out of the car to thank the stranger was at his window. "That was not that difficult now, was it?" "Thank you," Paul acknowledged with a smile. "You are welcome." The stranger had not changed his smile since Paul saw him first. "If you are going downtown, would you give me a lift to 22nd and Lansbury?" the stranger asked. Paul thought it was the least he could do and asked the stranger to hop in. They rode in absolute silence, the rain falling on the tin roof, and the rhythmic swipe of the wipers was the only sound. The stranger looked straight ahead, and what was even more odd, his smile would not fade. Paul pulled over at the corner of 42nd and Lansbury to let the stranger off. The stranger thanked him and walked away in the furious rain. Paul looked for a moment longer, and then to his horror, the stranger walked into a cemetery. Who the hell walked into a cemetery in a downpour like this? What the hell was this guy? Paul was out of his car and chasing behind the stranger in a flash, but it was too late. The stranger was nowhere to be seen. Just rows and rows of graves, and no man till the eye could see. There was no way he could have walked so fast into any direction. Paul was not someone who encouraged the supernatural nonsense, but that seemed to be the only explanation. Had he ridden 3 miles in the driving rain with a spirit? It made his hair stand on end, and a deep sense of dread filled him. "We have a survivor, sir," his deputy screamed into the phone with excitement. "This one got away from the serial killer." Paul told the deputy that he would be at the station within the hour. The sketch artist had taken the cue from the survivor and made a sketch. The stranger in the rain was staring at him. The smile was unmistakable. It was the serial killer. Paul crashed onto the chair behind him. In the distance, he could hear the thunder of the retreating storm. How does one catch a serial killer who is not even alive?